4 years into marriage with Rachel, I honestly believed I had her figured out. I thought I knew her habits, her moods, her little quirks. But the truth is, I didn't know her at all. I'll get to that, though. For now, let me start with what unfolded just last weekend, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Her birthday was coming up, and I wanted to pull off something meaningful. We had talked more than once about how badly we both needed a break from the grind, and I remembered her telling me about the spa days she used to enjoy with her college girlfriends. So I went into full planning mode. I spent weeks browsing reviews, comparing packages, and finally landed on this weekend deal at Silver Pines Retreat. It wasn't exactly the Grandview Hotel, but it looked solid, great feedback online. A spa menu full of options, hot tub, massages, the whole deal. I figured she'd love the surprise, and it would give us both a chance to relax. Looking back, I should have picked up on the signs. Rachel seemed strange whenever I brought up her birthday. Normally she's all about planning every detail of her celebrations, but this time she brushed me off. She kept saying she hadn't made up her mind yet, or maybe we should just keep it simple. That was the first red flag, and I completely ignored it. Saturday night rolled around, and we were at her sister Claire's place for a dinner party. Claire's the younger sister, and they're pretty close, so I figured it was the perfect moment to spring the surprise. I had printed the reservation details, tucked them inside a nice card, really tried to do the whole romantic gesture thing. We were sitting around Claire's dining table with about 8 people, including Daniel and a couple of their other friends, when I slid the envelope over to Rachel. The look on her face when she opened it wasn't what I imagined. I expected maybe excitement or at least curiosity, but instead she looked like I had just handed her a traffic ticket. She stared at the papers for a few seconds, the table buzzing with anticipation, waiting for the big reveal. Then she burst out laughing. And not the kind of laugh you hope for. She held up the papers and told everyone I'd booked us a weekend at what she called a truck stop motel pretending to be a spa. Right there at the table, she pulled out her phone, Googled the place, and started passing it around. According to her, the spa hot tub was just some ancient bathtub with jets from the early 90s. Everyone chuckled along with her while I sat there, trying to keep my cool. But then she went further. Rachel snatched the certificate from my hand and joked that maybe I should give it to someone on the street since at least they might appreciate trash like that. Then, locking eyes with me, she announced that she already had real plans with someone who actually knew what women wanted. That's when her friend Megan chimed in, saying Rachel deserved better, and Rachel just smirked, adding that she was already getting exactly what she deserved that very night. The whole table went silent for a moment before people awkwardly changed the subject. I just smiled and told Rachel she was right, because in that exact moment, as I sat there being ridiculed in front of her family and friends, everything suddenly clicked. The late nights at work, the fresh wardrobe, the sudden habit of hanging out with work buddies I had never met, the cold way she had been treating me. It all made sense. What Rachel didn't realize was that I had already been piecing the puzzle together. For the past 8 months, I had suspected something was wrong. Call it intuition or just noticing patterns, but when your wife suddenly turns into a stranger, you start paying attention. I had done my homework. I knew about Jason from her job. She thought she was slick with her secretive phone use and private messages, but the thing about people who think they're too smart is they slip up. What she didn't know was that I had been preparing for this very scenario. Not the spa embarrassment, but the moment when she would finally expose herself in front of others. I had been documenting her behavior, monitoring expenses, and meanwhile setting up my own independence, new job, higher pay, separate accounts, and a clear picture of where I stood financially in this marriage. So when Rachel boldly told the room she had better plans, I was more than ready. For years of marriage, and she thought she could publicly humiliate me and then waltz off into a perfect new life with Jason. The dinner wrapped up around 11, and she could barely sit still, itching to leave. She claimed she was heading to Megan's for some girl time, even though Megan had clearly left with Daniel. At that point, she wasn't even bothering to keep her lies straight. I went home and started making calls. Amazing how much you can get done on a Saturday night when you've been waiting for the right moment. First, I rang Rachel's manager to raise some concerns about questionable workplace relationships. Next, I called Jason's wife Linda. Yes, he's married too. Linda admitted she had been suspicious as well, and she was very eager to share information. By Sunday morning, Rachel's perfect birthday weekend had already gone up in flames. My phone started ringing at 6 in the morning, and it didn't let up. By noon, I had 118 missed calls. Rachel's voice filled my voicemail, frantic and angry, demanding to know where I was, why I wasn't answering, and swearing she was sorry about everything. But here's the truth about playing games. You don't mess with someone who's already 3 steps ahead. She thought she had humiliated me at that dinner table, but in reality, she had handed me the perfect reason to execute every part of my plan. When someone shows you who they really are in front of witnesses, you take them at their word. And that was just the beginning. Update 1. Remember how I mentioned Rachel's frantic calls on Sunday? By evening, she finally showed up at our house. It was around 7, and I was sitting on the couch watching the game when she walked in, looking like she hadn't slept a wink. The smug, confident woman from Claire's dinner was gone. She launched straight into apologies, saying she never meant to humiliate me like that and that she had only lashed out because of stress from work. According to her, she had unfairly taken it all out on me. She paced the living room floor while I stayed planted on the couch, rattling off how the spa trip was actually thoughtful and how she really did appreciate the effort I had put into it. I let her keep going, nodding here and there for about 15 minutes, letting her spin her story deeper and deeper. Then I asked the one question she couldn't bluff her way out of. Asterisk, where did you go after Claire's dinner party? Rachel? Asterisk, the way her face froze was unforgettable. She stammered, muttering something about heading to Megan's place and staying over since they had been drinking wine and talking late into the night. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the text exchange I'd had with Megan earlier that morning. Megan had been genuinely confused when I thanked her for looking after Rachel Saturday night, since she had left the dinner straight with Daniel. Rachel immediately tried to backpedal. She claimed she actually went to some other friend's house but couldn't quite remember who, blaming too much wine at dinner. I pressed her for a name, but she came up blank. Then she flipped it on me, demanding to know why I was interrogating her and accusing me of not trusting her. That's when I dropped the real bomb. I told her I had already spoken to Linda. Rachel's complexion drained instantly as she sank down onto the coffee table. She asked what I meant, so I explained that Jason's wife was very curious to learn that her husband's work conference weekend was actually booked with a married coworker, especially since Jason had told her he'd be out of town for business. Rachel broke down in tears, swearing it wasn't what I thought. She insisted Jason was just a friend, that they were working on some project together, and that nothing physical had happened between them. She pleaded that I was blowing everything out of proportion. I gave her another 25 minutes, sitting quietly as she twisted herself into knots trying to make it all sound innocent. Then I asked about Jason's supposed work conference. If they were just working on a project, why had he lied to his wife about where he was? Rachel got quiet and muttered she didn't know what Jason told Linda, that it wasn't her problem. So I asked her if she thought it was normal for married coworkers to hide weekend work meetings from their spouses. Her tone changed. She got angry, accusing me of twisting her words, calling me paranoid and controlling. She shouted that she was allowed to have male friends and professional relationships without me monitoring every detail. She even accused me of stirring up trouble by contacting Linda. That's when I pulled up the screenshots. Rachel thought she was slick by using WhatsApp, but she forgot that backups go to cloud storage. Because we share a family phone account, I had access to her data for months. I had been quietly watching as her chats with Jason shifted from casual work talk into planning a weekend escape, the same weekend as her birthday. I let her scroll through the messages herself. The ones where she called me boring and predictable. The ones where she complained about being stuck in a marriage that didn't meet her needs. The ones where she and Jason giggled about how clueless I was while arranging their romantic getaway. She read every word in silence before lifting her head. By then, the tears were gone. Now she was furious. She screamed that I had violated her privacy, that what I did was probably illegal. She claimed I had no right to look at her phone data, and that my snooping only proved I was the manipulative control freak she had described to Jason. I asked if she wanted to call Jason and fill him in on this conversation. She snapped that it was a stupid idea. So I told her I'd already spoken to him earlier that afternoon. Only it wasn't Jason who picked up. His wife answered. Turns out Linda had spent her morning digging through his stuff and found the hotel reservation printed out in his laptop bag. The very same hotel where Rachel thought she'd be spending her birthday weekend. Linda had some pretty pointed questions about his conference, and Jason was struggling to keep his lies in line. Rachel demanded to know what I had told Linda. I laid it out straight. I told her I suspected my wife was having an inappropriate relationship with a married coworker, and that she deserved to know her husband wasn't being honest about his weekend plans. I even mentioned how Rachel had publicly bragged about having better plans with someone who knew what women wanted, and based on everything I'd seen, that someone was clearly Jason. Rachel exploded. She screamed that I was deliberately trying to ruin her life, calling me a vindictive lunatic who couldn't stand the thought of her being happy with another man. She shouted that Jason actually valued her, made her feel special, unlike me who supposedly took her for granted. Then she admitted it outright. Yes, she loved Jason, and yes, they had been planning that weekend together. But she insisted none of that gave me the right to blow up her relationship. I calmly asked what she thought her next move was. Rachel said she wasn't sure, but she was finished pretending to be happy with me. She was going to figure out her future, and I needed to accept that our marriage was done. That's when I reminded her of the conversation I had already had with her manager on Saturday night. Rachel works at a small firm with strict rules against personal entanglements between departments. Jason is in management, and while she doesn't report directly to him, her boss does, making their involvement a clear conflict of interest. She demanded to know exactly what I said. I told her the truth. I had raised concerns about professionalism and how personal issues might be bleeding into the workplace. I pointed out the changes I'd noticed in her schedule and her attitude, which could easily be perceived as fallout from a questionable relationship. Her manager had been very interested, especially since there were already whispers about favoritism in Jason's department. Nothing formal yet, but enough chatter that HR was paying attention. Now, Rachel had an HR meeting scheduled with her boss for Saturday morning to discuss professional boundaries and workplace conduct. Jason had his own HR meeting scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. Rachel, on the other hand, spent Sunday night camped out at Claire's place. She walked out of our house around 10 o'clock, saying she needed time alone to think because In her words, I was impossible to talk to. Before leaving, she turned back at the door and told me I'd regret tearing apart her relationship with Jason, that I was too selfish to ever let her be happy. I told her she was right about regret, but she was wrong about who it would belong to. If regret came, it wouldn't be on my shoulders. Come Monday morning, she was already sending me texts, asking if we could talk before her HR meeting. She sounded desperate, saying maybe there was still a way to patch things up before the situation exploded further. I replied that I was open to talking, but only after I made a few more phone calls. Sunday had given me plenty of time to dig deeper into Jason and Linda's world. A little research showed they had bought their home just 20 months ago, with a mortgage based on both their salaries. Without both incomes, that house would be impossible to keep. Linda had been eager to talk, and the more we compared notes, the more questions she had about Jason's behavior. She was already suspicious about his conferences and unexplained expenses. That spa weekend wasn't the beginning of Rachel's downfall. It was simply the trigger that set everything in motion. Update 2. Saturday morning unfolded like a drama I could have sold tickets to. Rachel texted me again at 8 a.m., practically begging me to meet before her HR meeting. She wanted to know exactly what I had told her manager, her nerves showing through every word. I told her to focus on her meeting first and reassured her that we could talk afterward over coffee. Her meeting stretched on for 4 long hours. For the entire time, she sat across from her manager and HR while they reviewed policies about relationships between employees in different departments, conflicts of interest, and maintaining professional conduct. They grilled her over inconsistencies, over her attitude at work, over complaints that had been quietly building for 3 months. Apparently, her manager had noticed the dip in her work quality but never connected it to her personal drama, until I added the missing piece. By noon, she was calling me in tears, saying she'd been suspended pending a full investigation. She accused me of destroying her career, demanding to know why I would do such a thing. I calmly reminded her that she was the one who bragged, in front of witnesses, about having better plans with a married coworker. I didn't invent anything. She gave them all the ammunition herself. Jason's meeting later that day was even more brutal. Because of his position, which involved approving expenses and overseeing vendor contracts, HR dug into every approval he'd made, every report he'd signed, and every interaction that might have been tainted by favoritism or bias toward Rachel. They wanted explanations for everything. Then came the twist that sealed it. At 3 o'clock, while Jason was still stuck in that meeting, Linda walked straight into his office building. She asked to meet with his manager and HR, saying she had serious concerns about her husband's conduct and misuse of company money. And she came armed. Linda had printed copies of the hotel reservation Jason had booked with his company credit card for the so-called work conference. She had expense reports that showed dinners for 2 during business trips. She even had text messages where Jason complained about having to fix Rachel's mistakes because he cared too much about her to let her fail. Rachel found out about Linda's visit when Jason called her around 4 in the afternoon, sobbing. He'd been placed on immediate administrative leave while they launched a full audit of his expense reports and vendor records going back 14 months. His company treats financial violation as scheme, and using business funds for personal relationships is as serious as it gets. That night, Rachel came home in a state of pure hysteria. She screamed at me the second she walked in, accusing me of destroying both of their careers and ripping apart their future. She shouted that I was a spiteful sociopath who couldn't stand the fact she had finally found someone better. She kept insisting Jason was the best thing that had ever happened to her, and I had ruined it all out of jealousy and control. That's when I asked her if Jason had mentioned Linda's questions about their mortgage. Rachel stopped in her tracks, looking stunned, and asked what I meant. So I laid it out. Linda had confronted him about how they were going to keep the house afloat without his paycheck. She only worked part-time, and her income couldn't cover their monthly payments alone. Rachel dismissed it, saying that wasn't her concern, that Jason would figure it out. I asked her if she understood how serious this was for his career, not just for their finances. Jason worked in project management for a mid-sized firm that handled contracts with major companies in our area. Being fired for misuse of company funds and crossing personal professional boundaries would make him radioactive in the industry. Locally, he'd never get another job at that level. Rachel broke down again, this time in tears, asking why I was doing all this to her. She said she loved Jason, that they had real plans together, and I was tearing it apart out of spite. She begged me to admit this was just revenge for the way she treated me at Claire's dinner. She apologized again for mocking the spa trip, but she still insisted none of that justified me ruining her life. I told her she had it backward. She was the one who had ruined things, by choosing to get involved with a married man, by lying to me for months, by humiliating me in front of her family, by misusing her company's time and resources for her affair. Those were her choices, not mine. That's when she snapped again, shouting that I was being ridiculous. She said I must have known she was miserable, that our marriage had been dead for months, and that she just had the courage to move on first. So I looked her straight in the eye and asked her about our joint savings account. Rachel looked completely lost when I asked about our joint savings account. She blinked at me and said she didn't know what I was talking about. So I opened my laptop, pulled up our bank statements from the past 8 months, and laid them in front of her. The truth was right there in black and white. Every work dinner, every girls' weekend, every late-night trip she claimed was innocent had been funded with money from our joint account. Gas, hotel stays, meals, gifts, line after line of charges tied directly to her and Jason. The money we had worked so hard to put aside for a future home had been bled out little by little to bankroll her secret relationship with another woman's husband. Rachel's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. She stuttered that she hadn't realized just how much she'd spent, that the money wasn't the important part. She insisted we could rebuild our savings together. That's when I asked her how exactly she planned to do that, considering she was suspended and facing termination. It was only then that it seemed to dawn on her. This HR investigation wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was deadly serious. Her company had a zero-tolerance policy for workplace relationships that crossed departmental lines, especially ones that carried conflicts of interest. For the first time, she asked me what she was supposed to do if she actually lost her job. I told her maybe she should ask Jason for advice, since they had planned so much of their future together. Rachel snapped back that Jason couldn't help her right now. He had too many problems of his own. I reminded her those problems were hers too, whether she liked it or not, because she had tethered her future to a man about to lose his career, his marriage, and his home. She told me I was being harsh, that real couples work through hardship together. So I asked her flat out, which couple was she talking about? Was she planning on helping Jason and Linda make their mortgage payments? Was she going to move in with them and chip in for their bills? Or was she expecting Jason to dump his wife and suddenly support Rachel instead? She muttered that she and Jason would figure out their own situation, and that it wasn't any of my business. I told her she was right. It wasn't my business what they did together. But it was very much my business what happened to our shared accounts and our financial future. By Saturday morning, I had already met with a divorce attorney. Rachel didn't know yet, but she would soon. The attorney explained that money Rachel had siphoned off for her affair counted as marital waste, meaning I could recover it in divorce proceedings. When I showed him the bank records, he nodded with interest, clear evidence of systematic misuse of marital funds. That same afternoon, Rachel texted me, saying she wanted to go to counseling, that she finally realized she'd made mistakes and wanted to try to save the marriage. I told her counseling wasn't an option anymore, but yes, we needed to talk about our future. That evening, Linda called me with her own update. Jason had moved out and was staying with his brother while they began their separation. By Saturday morning, Jason's company had finished their audit, terminated his employment, and handed the findings over to legal. Linda was filing for divorce and wanted her attorney to coordinate with mine regarding marital assets and the money Jason and Rachel had wasted together. Rachel, though, still clung to the fantasy that she and Jason would get through this rough patch and build their life together. She had no clue that Jason's reality was about to collapse completely. Not just losing his job and house, but also facing restitution demands, legal charges, and the wreckage of his reputation. That spa weekend, the one she used to humiliate me, felt like it had happened years ago rather than just days earlier. She thought she was clever announcing she had better plans, with someone who really knew what women wanted. In the end, Jason did know what Rachel wanted. He just never calculated the cost. Final update. Saturday morning, Rachel got the call. She was officially fired. HR had finished their review and determined she'd broken multiple workplace policies on interdepartmental conduct and professional boundaries. Her boss also cited the steady decline in her work performance and attitude over the past several months. She phoned me in tears, saying she didn't understand how everything had gone downhill so fast. I told her it was time for a serious conversation about where we went from here. I suggested she come home so we could sit down and talk. She showed up around 3 in the afternoon, walked into the kitchen, and froze. The divorce papers were sitting right there on the table. She stared at them for what felt like an eternity before whispering, "Is this really what you want?" I told her what I had wanted was a wife who didn't humiliate me in public while sneaking off to plan secret weekends with a married coworker, funded by our own joint account. Rachel started crying again, insisting that she knew she had made terrible mistakes, but that didn't mean our marriage was beyond saving. She begged me to give her another chance, swearing she'd cut off all contact with Jason and prove her loyalty by rebuilding what we had. So I asked if she'd spoken to Jason lately. She admitted they'd been texting but said he was too wrapped up in his own mess right now. That's when I told her what had happened the night before. Jason had been arrested. Rachel went pale, almost ghost-like, and asked me to repeat it. I explained that Jason's former employer had pressed charges for misuse of corporate funds and scheme. The district attorney had become very interested in his pattern of using company resources for personal relationships. The audit showed it wasn't just with Rachel. He'd been filing suspicious reports for over 14 months. Jason had spent Thursday night in jail and only made bail that morning. Rachel demanded to know how I had that information. I told her Linda had been keeping me in the loop. That's when Rachel snapped, screaming that it wasn't fair I was teaming up with Linda to destroy Jason's life. She claimed Jason never meant to hurt anyone, that the expense issues were just mistakes, not deliberate scheme. I asked Rachel if she honestly believed that putting hotel charges for her secret trips on company credit cards wasn't a mistake. She quickly shot back that all the legal trouble wasn't her responsibility and that she shouldn't have to suffer the consequences of Jason's reckless choices with expense reports. She kept repeating that what they had was real love and that their bond mattered more than the circumstances surrounding it. That's when I brought up the lease on our apartment. While she had been busy daydreaming about her future with Jason, I had been quietly making moves of my own. I had already locked in a new apartment and had been moving my things out piece by piece over the past couple of weeks. Rachel hadn't even noticed, since she was spending most of her nights over at Claire's place anyway. When she asked what I meant about another apartment, I laid it out for her. By the end of the month, I'd be gone. Our lease required both our incomes to renew, and since she didn't have a job and I was pulling my name off the lease, she would need to figure out her own housing situation. She started to panic, insisting she couldn't cover the rent alone without steady income. She begged me not to push her out just to get back at her. I reminded her that she had been the one to stand in front of everyone and announce she had found better plans with someone who supposedly knew how to treat her right. I told her maybe she should call Jason and ask about those better plans. Rachel muttered that Jason couldn't step in right now because he was wrapped up in legal trouble and dealing with his split from Linda. I asked if she understood that those legal problems came directly from him funding their relationship with company money. She argued again that none of it was her doing, that she never told him to use his corporate card. So I pulled out the text messages between them, the ones where they openly discussed putting their hotel weekends and dinners on his expense account. Rachel stared at her own words, where she had suggested labeling romantic dinners as business meals and weekend getaways as conferences. She had been deeply involved in Jason's scheme for months. Still, she claimed those messages were just jokes, and that she never believed Jason would actually file false expense reports. I asked her if she thought the district attorney would laugh as hard as she did when they read those texts. It hit her then, her own words were evidence in Jason's scheme case. She broke down crying, saying none of this was what she wanted. She said all she ever wanted was to feel happy, to feel seen, and she thought Jason gave her that. Rachel clung to the idea that Jason understood her in ways I never could, that what they had was genuine, even if it was messy. I asked her straight out what her plan was now. She was unemployed, possibly tied into Jason's offenses, on the verge of losing her home, and in love with a man staring down criminal charges and divorce court. She admitted she had no idea what she was going to do, only that she and Jason would figure it out. That's when I told her about my conversation with Claire. Her sister had been furious when I told her about Rachel's affair and the real reason she lost her job. Claire had been especially embarrassed by Rachel's behavior at the dinner party, since she'd invited Daniel's co-workers and Rachel's public breakdown had reflected badly on the family. Claire said Rachel could crash at her house for just 2 more weeks. Then she needed to find somewhere else to live. Claire didn't want any part in her chaos and made it clear Rachel's bad decisions were hurting everyone around her. Rachel asked where she was supposed to go once Claire shut her out. I told her maybe Jason had a plan for her, since he had convinced her to bet everything on him. Rachel said Jason was holed up at his brother's place and couldn't have her stay there, so I asked what other choices she had. Most of her friends were also my friends, and they had all seen her outburst at the dinner party. Her family was disgusted with her decisions and refused to enable her. Her professional connections were burned too, since she had been fired for violation at work. That left her completely isolated. She finally realized she had destroyed nearly every relationship she had, all because of Jason. She had cut ties with family, alienated friends, ruined her career, and lost her reputation. All for a man now facing ruin himself, who couldn't even offer her a couch. Rachel asked me if there was any chance we could try again, maybe put the divorce on hold. She swore she understood now how badly she had messed up and promised to do whatever it would take to repair our marriage. She vowed she would never see or speak to Jason again, that she would dedicate herself to rebuilding with me. I told her that chance ended the night she stood up at Claire's dinner table and announced she had bigger, better plans with Jason. I reminded her of how she sneered at the spa trip I'd planned for her birthday and said I should give it to people on the street instead. She apologized for the dinner party, claiming she had only been trying to look strong in front of everyone. She admitted she had meant to humiliate me, to show our friends and family that she was leaving me for Jason with her head held high. She said the public scene had been Jason's idea, since he wanted their relationship out in the open. I asked her how that public relationship was working for her now. Jason was buried in court battles, divorce proceedings, bankruptcy, and the collapse of his career. She was jobless, homeless, tied into his legal mess, and abandoned by everyone she used to count on. Rachel collapsed completely, saying she couldn't understand how things had unraveled so badly. She kept repeating that Jason had promised her a new life, that he had sworn to take care of everything. She said he convinced her leaving me was the right choice, that she deserved more and would finally get it with him. I told her she was right about one thing. She got exactly what she deserved. After months of lying to me, draining our joint accounts, publicly humiliating me, and plotting a future with a married man who funded their romance with stolen money, the outcome she was facing was the one she had chosen. Rachel asked me what was going to happen to her now, and I told her flatly that it wasn't my problem anymore. She was a grown woman who had made her own decisions, and now she'd have to live with the fallout. I suggested she focus on finding a job and a new place to stay, because in less than 90 days, our divorce would be finalized. That Friday evening, Rachel walked out of our house with nothing but 3 suitcases and no place to land. The next morning, she texted me asking if she could come back for more of her things. I told her she'd need to go through my lawyer to handle property division from now on. Later that Saturday, Jason actually called me. He said he wanted to talk about Rachel and their situation. He admitted he never meant for things to spiral this far and claimed he cared about her too much to watch her suffer because of his mistakes. I cut him off and told him that whatever was happening between him and Rachel was none of my concern anymore. Then I hung up the phone. On Sunday, Rachel sent me a long message apologizing for everything and pleading with me to reconsider ending the marriage. She said she finally understood that Jason had manipulated her into believing our relationship was beyond repair and that she needed to find someone better. According to her, she never would have betrayed me if Jason hadn't convinced her she was wasting her life with me. I reminded her, through text, of exactly what she had declared at Claire's dinner party. She hadn't said a word about Jason manipulating her. She had stood there proudly and told everyone she had real plans with a man who knew how to treat a woman right. That night she had insisted she was getting exactly what she deserved. And the truth is, she was right. For weeks have passed since that disastrous spa weekend that set all of this in motion. Rachel is now living in a cramped studio across town, clocking hours at a retail job while she tries to claw her way back into her old career. Meanwhile, Jason pled guilty to scheme, took a deal for 3 years probation, and now owes restitution payments that will keep him financially ruined for years to come. Just yesterday, Rachel texted me asking if we could meet for coffee to talk about us. She said she's learned a lot about herself and finally understands what really matters in life. I replied that I was too busy this weekend. I had reservations at a spa resort, the very same resort she once mocked, calling it a trucker's motel with a fancy name. Funny thing is, it turns out that place is actually pretty great when you're not there with someone plotting to humiliate you. And this time, I'm going with a person who values thoughtful gestures and doesn't call surprise weekends trash to give away. At that dinner party, Rachel was right about one thing. She truly did get exactly what she deserved.
That was my story. What do you think about it? Would you have acted the same way or chosen differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Keeping Secrets channel for more stories like this. Oh, and one more thing. This story is our little secret, so shh.